So it felt like time for another graveside chat. And this time I'm in the new cemetery in Todos Santos. And I'm in the children's section where many of these babies were born and died on the same day, as we can tell from the dates on their gravestones. Just as I was setting up, a man drove up carrying a couple of oranges in his hand. He went to one of the graves and set the oranges on it. And I said, "So you're putting oranges on this grave?" And he said, "Yes, they're for my baby. She always loved oranges." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But as I said that, he pointed like this and looked up and said, "It's okay," meaning that she was in heaven with Jesus, as all the iconography in this place suggests. And I had come here today to speak about the suchness of this moment. And it seemed propitious, his comment, because his remark changed the suchness of the moment of setting up to do this talk into something I never could have imagined. But if we look at it openly, that's what every moment in life is like. We could never have preordained or decided upon the thoughts and feelings of this moment. The idea that we somehow can is an illusion. And that illusion is no more a form of escapism, in my view, than the idea that this man has that his beloved dead baby is in heaven with Jesus. Now, in the first century of the Common Era, two great philosophers began to speak about what has become known as Stoicism. One was Epictetus in Greece, and the other one was the Emperor Marcus Aurelius in Rome. Now, Epictetus was born enslaved and continued to be enslaved his entire life, and yet is considered one of the great philosophers of all time. Marcus Aurelius, at the extreme opposite end of the social scale, is also considered a great philosopher, and the two of them hit pretty much on the same idea, which has come to be known as Amor Fati, which means love your fate. Love your fate. Now, this implies the idea that there is fate, as if all of this had already been written and simply had to be lived out. And that is possible. Even the scientific literature suggests that everything that happens is a result of every particle and charge in every field everywhere in the universe converging upon this moment. And if so, everything theoretically is predictable. What stops it from being predicted, if this is true, is simply that there's too much to keep track of, and there's no way that anyone ever could have access to all that information at the same time so as to calculate happenings. But I like to think of fate in a slightly different way, not as predictive, but as what other people call luck or fortune. What I mean is that we're all born into certain circumstances, and life goes on from there and unfolds, I say, in the way that it must. Now, in the late 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche took the ideas of the Stoics from the first century and extended them to, I think, the best statement about Stoicism that I've heard. And what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, what he said was, to love your fate means not wanting anything to be different. Not wanting anything to be different. Not the past, he said, not the future, not for all eternity. To not want anything to be different is his definition of loving your fate. Now that's a tall order, a really tall order. I've had letters from a number of people expressing extreme difficulty, physical, mental, and emotional, and asking me to advise them. And usually I cannot. I don't have the answers to questions of extreme suffering. I know that when it occurs in my own experience, I'm hard-pressed to deal with it, but I must. What choice do I have, really? And that's the beginning of an approach to loving one's fate, the idea of choicelessness. This is happening in each moment as it is and as it must. And there's no alternative to that. I wrote about this in my 1917 book, The 10,000 Things, in chapter 18, in this way. I said, as far as I know, living has no purpose. One finds oneself alive in a world of living beings, never having asked to be here, nor having had any control of the circumstances of one's birth, one's family, one's physical and mental limitations, none of it. Having been dealt that hand of cards, the freedom of simplicity means doing whatever one does, whatever seems appropriate in each moment, while enjoying those thoughts, feelings, emotions that seem enjoyable, and enduring those that feel difficult. That's life. Any spirituality that denies this is nothing but pure escapism, in my view. And it does seem to come down to that. We love our fate, or we rail against it, and there's no choice. In each moment, I say things are as they are and can be no different. And this is what all of us are dealing with. Now, Nietzsche, in considering that aspect, came up with a really interesting idea that he called eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence. And I'm going to explain what he meant by that. And I'd like to say before I do that I am often asked for procedures or ways of becoming more awake. There's an agreement. How does one find an awakened view of the human condition? And I think this idea of eternal recurrence and the question it evokes, according to Nietzsche, is about as close to a method as one can find. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there is a method. I think there is not a method. But this question, at least, can open one's mind if it's taken seriously. So I'm going to suggest, before signing off here, that if you're interested in this kind of thing, take this question to heart and see where it leads. And the question is this: if you were given the opportunity to go back to the beginning of your life and live it all over again, from childhood, from birth to childhood to your present condition, with the one proviso that everything would be exactly as it was the first time, the same events, the same places, the same feelings, the same words spoken, etc., would you accept that? Or would you just age and die without the recurrence? It's an open question. I'd be happy to hear any ideas in the comments to this video, or you can go to the Depending on No Thing Facebook page. There'll be a link below, and join the conversation there. I'm going to raise that question there too, I believe. So that's it for the day. I'm happy to answer your questions. You can post them as comments to this video or on the Depending on No Thing Facebook page. You can also follow my commentaries and videos on my Substack page, and there'll be a link to that page also in the description. Thanks very much for listening. It's my pleasure to be able to speak this way. Be well.